So guys, today and tomorrow, I want to do three separate videos about AEW. And I want to talk about, the positives of Adam Page beating Will Ospreay to become, the number one contender for Jon Moxley at AEW All In. And then I'm going to do another video where the positives for Will Ospreay to have that opportunity. And I also want to do another video talking about why it would be a bad idea to do a triple threat. Because one thing that people don't understand is that one card that AEW could do is be like, hey, let's do Will Ospreay, Adam Page, and Jon Moxley in a triple threat match. But I don't think that's going to be a good idea. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the 10 reasons why you should have Adam Page become the number one contender and face Jon Moxley for the AEW championship. My first reason is that Will Ospreay is predictable, that a lot of people are betting on Will Ospreay to win. And one thing they say about AEW is that it's extremely predictable with a lot of their matches. You obviously know it's going to be Mercedes versus Toni Storm. You obviously know that when they had Athena versus Mercedes, Athena was going to lose, even though she's been the Ring of Honor champion for over 1,000 days. So a lot of criticisms about AEW has been it being extremely, extremely, extremely predictable. So you can subvert expectations by having Hangman Adam Page actually win and face Jon Moxley. My next reason, number two, is that Will Ospreay is best saved for Forbidden Door. So Forbidden Door 2025, there is a report that it made over $1 million in ticket sales, and there's still tickets to sell for that show. So you got to ask yourself, Will Ospreay is also on that poster. So I definitely think that Will Ospreay being on that poster is, helped out really. So I would say to myself, wouldn't I want Will Ospreay to have a match at AEW All In? But wouldn't I want him to be the main event match at AEW Forbidden Door? Because a lot of people are expecting Will Ospreay to be the main event of that show, really, or be the champion of that show. So that could be, another big thing as well, really, where it could be announced that whoever is the champion at that time will face Will Ospreay at Forbidden Door. And that can get the London crowd excited, saying we're going to see our hometown hero and all that, So sometimes you want to do that. And then the other thing too is that you don't want, if you make Will Ospreay the main event or champion or challenging for the title, it would be good to do that at Forbidden Door, because then you're okay, we're going to see him be the champion twice, really. So it kind of breaks that monotony, really. So those are two good. That's a good reason as well. That save him for Forbidden Door. Adam Page makes a better story. That's my third reason, because the other thing is that with Adam Page, with Will Ospreay, there's really no story there. He just wants to be, the workhorse of AEW. He wants to, do what he can with the championship. So the problem with that is, versus Hangman Adam Page, where he may become champion, but he has to overcome the Death Riders and their cheating. So what would happen if Swerve Strickland shows his atonement by helping Adam Page become champion if the Death Riders cheat? What would happen if Adam Page betrays the Young Bucks and becomes the top babyface in the company? What if Adam Page says something like, I want to fight everybody, and the best way to fight everybody is by being the champion, because once I hold this title, everybody is going to pick a fight with me, and I'm going to pick a fight with everybody. And he could also say something because he's one of the EVPs as well, say something this company's gone to shit, really, and now you're seeing the two groups that brought it to shit, the Young Bucks and the Death Riders, so there's a story there within that. And then also too, I think you can tell a story as somebody who just wants to put the company in a better place, but he's also, somebody who So in a better place. So you can be like, oh well, Darby Allin doesn't deserve it because he went climbed Mount Everest. You can do a story with Adam Page about that, and then you can also do a story, and I'll talk about a little bit later about. You can be like, hey, he never really got a chance to be a good champion or a developed champion because they gave the title to CM Punk to afterwards. So that's another good reason. Reason 4 would be this prevents Swerve Strickland and Adam Page becoming a tag team. A lot of people don't want to see Adam Page and Swerve Strickland become a tag team because they're better off in the heavyweight championship picture. So it's almost like a downgrade. And I also would say that AEW does not have a good heavyweight championship picture because a lot of wrestlers go all over the roster. So you had Darby Allin challenge for the heavyweight championship one year, then he challenged for the TNT championship, then he was with Sting in the tag team championship. So people don't want that to happen to Adam Page and Swerve Strickland, where they're like, oh, we're going to have them face the Hurt Syndicate, or we're going to have them win the Ring of Honor, tag team titles from Sammy Guevara and Dustin Rhodes. So it prevents, them from going down the roster, really. And as we all know, there's a difference between Shawn Michaels and John Cena becoming the tag team champions and still main eventing WrestleMania and still having a great match and John Cena's still the champion, and then Swerve and Hangman, who a lot of people like, and then they're being bumped to out of the heavyweight division, really. I just think that Swerve and Hangman are better off in the heavyweight division. You need to establish your heavyweight division and establish people who only care about going after that title, really. So why take two people out of it that two people like that are former champions and that the audience likes, really? So you're going to attract more people by having them be in the heavyweight division instead of the tag team division. My next argument is number 5. Adam Page is the more versatile wrestler. So that just means that when you look that Will Ospreay is more of a high flyer and high endurance and a Dave Meltzer type of wrestler where he goes on for a long time and there's a lot of no selling, there's a lot of hard hitting moves, there's no selling, goes on for a long time, and it's very epic. That seems to be the only style that Will Ospreay can do. And we also seen the match with him and Kyle Fletcher where it was controversial because a lot of people were saying, hey, that's a little ridiculous when you do a flip off the cage and then it goes on for another 20 minutes and other things like that. So Will Ospreay matches have that same formula of starting slow, and then they last a while, they last a little bit longer than they should, and then it becomes a little unrealistic. So it's like the same formula. You can call it a Will Ospreay match. With Adam Page, he can do a long endurance match, he can do a brawler type of match, he can do a hardcore type of match, he can do high flyer stuff. And one thing about, and I said this about Kyle Fletcher, and I've also said this about Adam Page, is that they're of the best wrestlers on the AEW roster because they know, and MJF as well, because the three of them know that if you're going to have a match, you have to pick the right style of wrestling performance. So again, there's talk about AJ Styles joining AEW. So if Adam Page and AJ Styles had a match, it'll be more like flippy high flyer type of thing, really. If Dustin Rhodes wants one more chance at the title and he's kind of like a brawler, hang in there type of wrestler, Adam Page would do that. If you want to do, John Moxley and Adam Page, and they both want to kill each other over the title, and you set it up, or you want to do Swerve and Hangman versus the Young Bucks, blood, sweat, and tears over the AEW, over the future of AEW, you can do a bloody match, really. But Adam Page, and he's very underlooked with this, but he's more versatile. With Will Ospreay, you're probably going to have, more as I said, it's like high flyer, high endurance, no selling type of matches, really. So Adam Page is the more versatile wrestler. And then also, too, if you want a champion, you got to wrestle multiple styles, really. Like when I forgot his name, Josh Alexander was in TNA. He wrestled he was the champion for over a year, but he wrestled so many different style matches. And that's what a good wrestler does. You don't just have the same type of formula. So Adam Page is more versatile. The biggest argument is Adam Page builds new stars because when he had the Texas Death Match with Swerve, that's when a lot of people were talking about Swerve Strickland, saying, hey, this is not just a former tag team champion that's wrestling around with Keith Lee. This is a guy who could be a heavyweight champion. And it was that match that made Swerve Strickland considered. And then it was their feud and how far they took it. And I would also give a lot of credit to Swerve Strickland. And it's also very evidential that he and Nana are like backstage lawyers, meaning that they know how to talk to Tony and be like, hey, we want to really just, go to the next level, really. So it's a mix of Swerve self-advocating, and it's also a mix of Hangman Adam Page and Swerve having great matches, having matches they could talk about, having like a very strong feud and all that. So, like I said, what really helped Swerve was not just being a great wrestler and knowing backstage politics and doing those things. It was also what he did with Adam Page, really. So Adam Page makes new stars. And that's my, and that's my sixth, and that's my seventh reason. So with Will Ospreay, he really hasn't done that. You can talk. I'll talk about my next reason in just a minute. All right, no, I'll talk about it now. So my eighth reason is Will Ospreay and Don Callis versus the Don Callis family did not build new stars. So what I mean by this is two things. That number one, the biggest feud that you had was Will Ospreay versus Kyle Fletcher. And Kyle Fletcher is not considered a main event wrestler. He's more kind of considered a lackey of the Don Callis family. So why would you want Will Ospreay to be the world heavyweight champion? He's going to have great matches, but he's shown that he can't make a new star. We don't see Kyle Fletcher consistently being talked about as a heavyweight champion. We kind of see him as as more like a lackey of the John Callis family. And then also Konosuke Takeshita, we don't see him, in the heavyweight championship picture. So there's also something to be said about Tony Khan not booking them that well, because they have a couple of issues. It's that Will Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher and Takeshita have great matches, but they've not done enough to have Takeshita and Kyle Fletcher be considered heavyweight champions or in the heavyweight championship picture. So obviously, why do you want Will Ospreay to be a champion? Because he's not turned those guys into heavyweight champions or people to be considered for heavyweight championships. But then you have Adam Page make Swerve Strickland a heavyweight champion and a box office draw, really. So I think that if I want to make new stars and make a heavyweight championship division so people know who's in that, you would rather have Adam Page. The other thing, and I'll say this, is that it's also the fault of Tony Khan, because he didn't really push Kyle Fletcher and he didn't push Takeshita. Like, they still power around with Don Callis, so there's not upward momentums. And then also there's Kyle Fletcher, and right now, like, his character is he's also kind of doing that gay predator humor. So there's also like Kyle Fletcher, just doing like what he does. Kyle Fletcher likes comedy too much, so Kyle Fletcher's his own enemy. And then also like he's trying to do some gay predator. He's trying to do like gay predator comedy, So Kyle Fletcher's hurting himself really. And then I also would say on top of that is that the Don Callis family, they're like the Will Ospreay jobbers. So like whenever Will Ospreay's in a tournament or whenever Ospreay needs opponents with people who can wrestle his style, really, you're gonna have Don Callis and his family just, lose to him instead of like them actually winning or them actually being like, okay, let's do a championship series where Kyle Fletcher beats Will Ospreay. Will Ospreay's like, oh my God, really, we got to have another match. Do you have it this time? And then maybe Kyle Fletcher wins. If that ever happened, they'll just have Will Ospreay win. So that's what I want to say, that, Will Ospreay does not build stars, but Adam Page did. My biggest thing is Swerve Strickland got better because Swerve Strickland was considered for heavyweight championships. He was a box office draw. He's still a box office draw. It's something to see. All that stuff with Adam Page led to that. But Kyle Fletcher is not a draw. Kyle Fletcher is not even has never been considered for a heavyweight championship, and he's kind of like the most renowned person who's faced Will Ospreay. So that's one of the reasons why, if I want to make new stars, if I want to make new feuds, if I want to build people like Anthony Bowens or Darby Allin or Daniel Garcia or have like a dream match between like a one more shot at the title between Adam Copeland versus Adam Page. You know, I would kind of rely on Adam Page because he's the more of a storyteller and he's actually built talent and made new stars like Swerve Strickland. So that's my eighth reason. The ninth reason is Will Ospreay is a controversial wrestler. Both Will Ospreay and Adam Page are controversial wrestlers. The controversy of Will Ospreay is like what I said is a Will Ospreay match because it's unrealistic. Like I said, he did a Spanish fly off the cage with Kyle Fletcher. He hit Kyle Fletcher with a Tiger Driver on thumbtacks, and it still continued. When he and MJF had that match for the International Championship, it went on for an hour. Most people in fights don't last an hour. And then also they have that, pardon my language, retarded rule in AEW where without announcing it, without establishing it, they say, hey, we can fight in the audience for whatever amount of time, really. If you want to be a heavyweight champion like Will Ospreay, you don't do stuff like that. You have to say Tony, you have to say bookers, you have to say referees and everybody, I'm the champion, and we can easily say something like false count anywhere or pinfalls and submissions only. And he didn't do that, and MJF didn't do that. Because when you have those things in matches where people fight all over the audience, or you have a match get 5 stars and people fight all over the audience and break the 10 count rule, you are being overrated. You are having Dave Meltzer, allow and not criticize something that's major. So those are the two big criticisms of Will Ospreay's. His match stuff. Obviously, when he had the match with MJF, they fought in the audience for such a long time, and you can't be doing that in a lot of in a lot of AEW stuff. If you want to be a champion, you gotta say fall counts anywhere is how we do things and establish that. Or you have to be like, and wrestle more versatile style. With Will Ospreay, like I said, it's high flyer, high endurance, a bunch of no selling, and going on for an unreasonable amount of time. And then, as I said, it becomes very repetitive. And that's why he's a controversial wrestler. Adam Page is a controversial wrestler because he's known for more brawling and other things like that. But I'll talk about that in, 10 reasons why Will Ospreay should win. The next reason, my 10th reason, is Adam Page is a more Attitude Era wrestler. There's a lot of people who want the Attitude Era to come back. There's a lot of people who want a more violent, high endurance type of style. And then there's a lot of people who want, more stars that are edgy. Because, now John Cena is the WWE champion, and isn't he associated with being kid-friendly, even though he's a little edgy now? You have Jimmy Uso, who is very kid-friendly with the Yeet stuff. So, and then also Joe Hendry's kind of like a meme type of thing, really. So I asked myself, you have 3 champions in WWE right now with Joe Hendry, even though he's the TNA champion, but he's kind of like a visitor. And then you also have John Cena, and then you also have Jimmy Uso. So you have 3 champions that are kind of very PG. So wouldn't you want your AEW champion to stand out a little bit more? What's the best way that Adam Page would stand out? He has more violent, gritty, brawling type of matches, really. So like I said, he's more edgy. And then also, too, I think with professional wrestling, one of the appeals of AEW is that it's TV-14. It's not meant for the kiddies. It's more like taking a kid to a PG-13 movie. Or in the 70s, how some people took their kids to Jaws. It's more of an edgy content type of company, but they have no problem going rated R. And that's good because you can't just make everything kind of babyish or for like the little kids. So with Adam Page, you get more of that. So he's more of an Attitude Era type of wrestler. He's more of a TV 14 type of wrestler. It's different from the PG stuff you see in WWE, and they have PG champions. And even like Cody Rhodes, who's a very PG champion, even though he said, hey, Rock, go fuck yourself. So if you want somebody who's going to break the monotony of PG champions, want somebody with a little bit more Attitude Era, want somebody with a little bit more edge and more like, I don't give a fuck type of persona, really. And then people say like John Moxley was going to be the next Stone Cold Steve Austin with how he came off, really. Adam Page is more that, really. So, you know, you want a more edgy wrestler. You don't have a more, I don't give a fuck. I do whatever the fuck I want. I look like a badass. I have the moxie of a badass. You know, your guy is Adam Page, really. So he's more of an attitude type of wrestler, and there is a market for that. And the last reason that I would say is Adam Page has a redemption story. So I gave you 10. The 11th and the bonus reason is that Adam Page has a redemption story. And what I mean by that is that he did not get a chance to become champion or establish himself as a long-term champion, because when CM Punk came to the company, he kind of became the paper champion for CM Punk. And then also, too, he had issues with CM Punk, and I think that that's one of the reasons why they took the title off of him. And if Adam Page is not being professional, then yes, he should have taken it off and understand CM Punk is a draw, really. For example, Cody Rhodes is the champion, but Cody Rhodes was the champion. But if he had issues with John Cena, then it's almost like, why would you want to make him champion again? You have to know who's making the most money, and you have to do right by them. So also part of the redemption could be saying that maybe Adam Page has worked on his ego, he cares about the company. And I really think with Adam Page, he really does come off, he's really presented as a wrestler that a lot of people like, really, because he's not one of he's one of the EVPs, but he's not an entitled little prick, or he's not really like pretentious and all that. With the Young Bucks, they really come off as entitled, and with Kenny Omega, you kind of see how he has a championship now. There's a lot of attention on him, even though he's a babyface. He still gets like the Breakfast Club treatment, just like John Cena and Randy Orton and Triple H in WWE. But Adam Page, can be a redemption person because he went from being really privileged and disrespectful to CM Punk, but also he didn't really have a chance to shine and show what he could do as a champion, and now he has that opportunity, really. And also, another part of his redemption is that if you remember that the first championship match that they had in AEW was him versus Chris Jericho. So they actually made him lose because, Chris Jericho is a more familiar name. So he was in the inaugural championship match. He didn't get that because he wasn't like, he wasn't more of a box office champion. And then also he got cut short because CM Punk was a more box office champion. Then he had issues with CM Punk. And now he can become a champion, and rightfully so. Adam Page is a box office draw. He's on the cusp of being a really great babyface champion if he decides to do what he wants or turn babyface and being like, hey, I'm sick and tired of the EVPs being entitled little bitches, and I'm sick and tired of them using me and telling me what to do and threatening to fire me, whatever. I want to do what I want to do. And I think that's going to resonate with a lot of people, because there's a lot of people who say, okay, well, that's the one of the issues with AEW is that there's a lot of entitled bitches run the company. And then now you have a character that is against the entitled bitch thing. So there's a lot of appeal within that. There's a lot of appeal within redemption angle. There's a lot of appeal in what he can be representative of in AEW, is that AEW needs to get back to, it's about everybody who's an underdog, working hard, getting the shine, instead of like being a privileged instead of like long-term stories with people like John Moxley, who became champion because Bryan Danielson said, hey, I wanted to become the champion after me, really. So there's a lot of like redemption and other like things about that as well, really. But overall, I gave you 11 reasons. Like I think that my prediction is that if I was to bet money, I would bet $100 on Will Ospreay beating John Moxley. I would bet $50 on it becoming a triple threat, and I'll bet $1 on Adam Page becoming the champion, because I really think that the booking says it's going to be Will Ospreay versus John Moxley, because that is like the box office draw type of match. So that's all I have to say, and we'll see in a couple of weeks. I'm actually going to go down to motherfucking Phoenix, and have some motherfucking good ice cream, do a motherfucking balloon ride, and watch that motherfucker of a great match. Because we all know that Adam Page versus Will Ospreay is going to be a great motherfucking match unless there's a lot of bullshit Vince Russo type of interference. So we'll see what happens, and we will take it from there.